Can't stand this book.
Morning to you too, Nicholas.
Maybe if you stop complaining and actually try putting a dent into this 500-page masterpiece, you can learn to appreciate Dickens.
Why should I care? It doesn't have any relevance to me.
What you need is a life lesson from literature lecture.
If I wanted a lecture, I would have asked you about the elections, Rod.
So, Great Expectation takes place during a time and place full of social class division.
Dickens drew a lot on his own personal experiences growing up poor in London in the early 1800s. British society, which had always been class conscious, became even more sharply divided along class lines because the wealthy class could take advantage of the new innovations of the Industrial Revolution.
Sounds like a darn good thesis.
You can get anything out of this?
Huh?
Okay, Nick, let's look at this. Great Expectation takes place with a young protagonist, Pip, and it follows his life all the way up to adulthood and explains his struggles with class division.
I don't see how I could relate with a poor English orphan.
Well, if only you'd pay attention to me.
Keep talking, Rod.
It begins with a young Pip in the marshes of Kent, England.
Looks spooky.
It's one of the main settings, and the spookiness is delivered on Dickens' part because the mist in the marshes always foreshadows something bad is about to happen.
Through the fog of the marsh, a convict walks up to Pip and threatens him and asks for food and a file to cut off his leg iron. Pip brings back the supplies that the convict asked and leaves in fear from the experience.
The convict is captured the next day, and Pip thinks that will be the last he will hear of him, but, well, I don't want to spoil it for you.
Go on, please spoil it so I don't have to read this.
This is where the plot thickens. So Pip is then summoned to a place called the Saddest House.
And Saddest House changes everything for Pip.
At Saddest House, Pip meets an old, eccentric lady who lives in her wedding dress in the dark. Just look at this quote.
But the most important thing in Saddest House is that Pip meets Miss Havisham's adopted daughter, the beautiful Estella. But she is mean and doesn't like his boots, which is Victorian upper-class code for, you're common.
Should have worn his blue suede shoes.
Funny, Nick, but let's focus here. The shoes were actually assigned to social class.
We're going to have to speed this up a bit, so here's what happens. After Saddest House, Pip becomes rich, travels to London to become a gentleman, Magwitch returns, Miss Havisham gets burnt again, this time by actual fire, Magwitch escapes and dies, and Pip meets up again with Estella. Throughout Pip's journey from common boy to wealthy gentleman, Dickens reveals his message about social class through symbols and themes. So let's get to these symbols. The first symbol is Pip's boots. He had one kind when he was poor, but when he was wealthy, he went to the boot makers.
The setting Dickens uses sets up the dichotomy between the wealthy and common classes.
Did he just use the word dichotomy?
Progress? Remember the leg irons on Pip's convict? Well, Dickens was making the point that there was no social mobility, that there was no escaping the lower class. And Dickens' themes can be found in Victorian poetry as well. Cousin Kate by Christina Rossetti is about being proud of your social class when it isn't high, something Pip eventually learns in Great Expectations.
Have you heard of the Civil Rights Movement?
Like Martin Luther in the Protestant Church.
No, Nick, more like the writers and poets of the Civil Rights Movement, such as Maya Angelou. In her poem Caged Bird, the iron bird cage symbolizes how blacks in our country are confined to a lower social class. Remember the leg irons? Just as in Dickens' time, a person of a low social class is more likely to live a life of crime, or more likely to be accused of a crime. Like Magwitch, many African Americans born into poverty will end up in prison.
So this is how Dickens resonates today.
Yes, and in the upcoming election, it's basically the wealthy class versus the common class, because neither Bernie Sanders nor Donald Trump is listening to the talking points of their party platforms.
Donald Trump has hijacked the Republican Party, and he flies around in his private jet holding rallies where he's actually been calling Mexicans rapists and wants to stop the inflow of all Muslims.
And Bernie Sanders is a self-proclaimed socialist. He believes in the welfare state that we've been learning in AP Europe. Also, he wants to make college free to help people move up in society.
This actually kind of reminds me of the Johnson versus Goldwater election. Kind of like your grade, Nick, a landslide.
So Pip learned that a person's worth should not be determined by their social class. So I should get reading because I'm an important part of this process.
Duh! Back me up here, Charles.